Hi, Dr. Marzano. I was just going to talk to you about the goals I have set for myself this year and cover those. So first of all, my three goals were involving assessment and feedback, grouping and regrouping, as well as motivating and inspiring students. My first goal, assessment and feedback, I want students to be able to tell me how to show proficiency on their learning target. So I know this is an area I'm super weak in. I'm really good at telling the students, this is what we're doing today. This is what you need to do to get this score. But I'm bad at letting the students take ownership of that and tell me what they think they need to do and what they need to be working on. And I do believe that when I am better at this, the students will understand their learning target even better because they've taken ownership of it, as well as just be more motivated because of that ownership. So that's my first goal. My second goal is all about grouping and regrouping. I just want students to know who their groups are, why we're working in the groups we are. And in music, this is something I haven't been great at. I think because I have the whole school, I haven't been great about having very changing groups. Like often in the past, I feel like I've let students choose their own groups, which doesn't always work well. The students like that, but you don't always work well together. I've never done really assigned groups, so what I'm doing with this is doing a mixture of both, and and then just seeing how that group work goes and if it works better now that I'm being more purposeful about my grouping and regrouping. And then my last area for my goal was motivating and inspiring students, and I want to design my activities obviously to be engaging, but what I want the students to be able to do is take control over some of that design. So once I present their learning target to them, I want them to be able to tell me what they want to do to show proficiency over that learning target. And just take, again, same with assessment and feedback, take more ownership. So those are my three goals, and I gave out the pre-surveys, and I do feel like the surveys lined up well with my goals. Some of the questions I got back pretty high averages, but some of them that were lower lined up with the goal pretty well. So the one that really stood out to me was the group work. One of the ones that really stood out was many students said, when I work with others, my learning is better than when I work alone. What they said was they felt like they learned better by themselves. And I found that working with the groups, students often don't want to work in groups. They would rather just work individually. They don't want to have to learn to cooperate with one another, which obviously that's a life skill that they're going to need to learn. So I'm very happy that this is one of my goals. So definitely these areas I think will improve my classroom and my teaching. If I can master these and continue to work on these, it'll be a huge change in the class and in student learning as well, and just teaching the students to take ownership. I'm excited about seeing how that goes. I selected these goals based on the self-assessment. So you had your self-assessment in the thing, which I did as well, and Barb and Brian also had sent out a Google Doc form for us to do, and we had to self-assess through all of our framework, every single thing and through it. And based on that, I scored myself low in these areas, and these were areas that I felt like were really just important to a classroom, as well as being a Marzano Academy. I think these are a big deal in separating us from other schools out there. So I selected these based on that self-assessment, as well as what I felt would be most valuable to my classroom and to the students. So I've written out all these goals, and in order to collect the evidence that I am working on these, I have steps for each one of my goals. So I'm going to start with grouping and regrouping. I have the steps listed out, and I'll just read those for you. I have students, no groups. I will put students in their groups based off of what level they are in music or what level they're at in the learning target we're working on, and assign the appropriate groups that way. One big thing is I want students to know the purpose of why we're working in groups. So obviously I'm going to tell them, but I also want them to get together as a group and create group goals together, and talk about working with one another and why we have to work with one another and how we can learn from each other. So that's going to be a big part of the group work, is students learning that process and learning to work with one another better. And then obviously once they're not going to always be in that group, students learn at different speeds. So based on what they're showing individually, I will regroup as needed. So that covers grouping and regrouping. The next goal, assessment and feedback. The first step in that is obviously students knowing the learning target and understanding the learning target, so putting it in student-friendly language, giving them the success criteria they need to know that this is what I need to know to do this learning target. Students practice it. Students then will self-assess and tell me where they think they are in the learning target. And then I'm going to have students set goals on the items that they self-assessed on. Like you showed me that you're a score 2 on this in this area. What should our goal be regarding that? And then the last step is, after all that, the students will then tell me ways that they can show proficiency on the learning target, and obviously that would be the final assessment going through that process. So third goal, motivating the students having control in the design of our projects that we do in music. The steps I have for this is very similar to the assessment and feedback. Students know the learning target, student-friendly language. So where it changes a little bit is I talk more about, in my list of things to do, I talk more about my student buy-in. I have students who are able to explain success criteria for learning target and are then able to propose ways to demonstrate the learning target and add various elements to the project. Students will create personal learning goals based off of what they decide is an appropriate way to demonstrate the learning target. So what I've found often with the learning targets is I know I have my ideas on what they need to do to show it, but when I give them control over it, they might want to do it in a different way, which is totally okay. Like, instead of me saying you have to do this song this way, maybe they want to do it through another song, something that they're more interested and have more buy-in. So I want to give the students opportunity to do that so that they can take more ownership of their learning, as well as be motivated to work on it because it's something that they are interested in. So I think I'm really excited about these 3 goals and working through these and seeing, hopefully just I'm hoping to see the students much more engaged and much more excited about what they are doing. So my plan for collecting all the evidence needed that I'm working on these is I'm going to keep reflections on all 3 of my goals, and just anecdotal evidence that I am working on these. I'm going to be doing reflections on how I see it impacting students, And obviously the surveys will serve as evidence as well, because once I give those post surveys, I'm hoping obviously that averages will go up and that students are showing that we've been working on these goals and that it's made a difference to them. So, and then just going over my survey results, I'm going to pull them up. I did use what you had provided as far as the questions went, and some of them I didn't know how the students would answer, because students often view things a little differently than I do, I know, and so I was excited to see what their opinions were on this. And so as far as going, the goal, organizing students to interact, my one that was the lowest with an average of 2.1 was the question. Let's see, sorry. Sorry, I'm scrolling through. I have all the data right in front of me. When I work with others, my learning is better than when I work alone. That was one that wasn't super high in there, that I really do want the students to understand the importance of working with groups. So that's one I really want to focus on. Motivating and inspiring students. This one was right in line with my goal I had set for myself. So I felt like all the students were showing that I do help them make goals. They all felt strongly about that, but my teacher lets me do projects that are important to me. Did score a little lower than the other ones, not super low, 2.6, but if I'd like to see that average go up a little bit. So, and then the last area is involving the assessment and feedback for the students. And then the one that specifically related exactly to my goal, my teacher allows us to create our own assessments. And that one was a lower average of 2.2. So I feel like that is true. I have always, I've done the assessments. I've told students this is how we need to accomplish this learning goal. So it'll be a change for them, having more control over that. So those were, I feel like with the surveys I gave, the questions that were lower lined up with the goals I had set, which showed me, yeah, that my goals were correct, and I'm glad I selected those goals. For all the areas, my standard deviations averaged, they were all about anywhere from 0. I don't know, 0.6, 0.4 to upwards to 0.9. So, and then I only had a scale of 3. So those standard deviations, most of them I felt like it was showing that I had accurate data. But on my second, when I do the surveys again, I would love to see some of those go down even farther. I mean, as far as we can get. Obviously, the data needs to be very reliable. I'd like to see all of them more around the 0.5 mark. Some of the questions were, but some of them had more like a 0.9. So it'll be interesting to see what the second batch of surveys pulls up. With these surveys, I surveyed 186 students. I surveyed most all of the intermediate students, as well as a large portion of the primary students, so this is a good representation of the school. all grade levels were covered, K through 5. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes, and I'm excited to see, as I work on these goals, see the students take ownership, be engaged. I'm obviously looking for all those things, as well as I'm really excited to see what the post surveys turn up. So thank you so much.